name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Categoist Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.categoist.com, and this is for our record segment today, and we're talking with Scott Campbell from the tribute band Farmer Bob, and today, Scott, we're going to be talking about your cover of a Judas Priest song, Living After Midnight, and the album it came from, which was, of course, 1980's British Steel album. And just so people kind of know the time frame we're talking here, the album was a sixth studio album by Judas Priest, and it was released on April 14th, 1980. And kind of interesting, I was seeing the length of the album is 36 minutes and 10 seconds, which is just a little over a half an hour, which is kind of interesting to me when you consider what a major classic album that has become, since its release. Yeah, and let me talk about your decision to kind of cover the song. I got to tell people, again, they can go on YouTube or your Reverb Nation page, and they can find your cover of Living Under Midnight. I'm assuming you chose to cover it just because it's a great song and a great rock anthem?
Correct. I would say that British Steel in general was my first introduction to Priest, as Rock and Roll Over was to Kiss.
Interesting.
That was the one that drew me in.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that's a lot. That's very much the same story I have as far as my introduction to Judas Priest and a lot of other Priest fans. And I think the reason for that is, let's be honest, this was probably back then, especially, and to this day, probably remains one of the most commercial Judas Priest albums of all time. Where when that album was released, for the first time ever, you were really starting to hear a lot of radio airplay, which Judas Priest didn't really get too much of previous to this album, because a lot of the previous albums were a lot more heavier and metal-like,
Yeah. Well, the previous albums were more, I don't want to say progressive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm, kind of almost leaning, coming from like psychedelic, the early leanings.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you say that, Scott, because I am, of course, a long-time Priest fan like you, but for the first time I had a chance to kind of listen to the very first Judas Priest album, Rock-a-Rolla, which is kind of like listening to it for the very first time for me. It's almost like listening with fresh ears to a new album, because while I've heard some of those songs over the years, a lot of the songs I never even heard, and just to kind of give people kind of a feeling for what you're talking about, I don't have a name in front of me. There's a song on that album that's like 8 or 9 minutes long. It's kind of divided up into 3 sections, and there is a real progressive rock element to some of the stuff on that first album.
Definitely, and I enjoy it. I really do like the early Priest. I love what they became, but I'm kind of like you. I kind of went backwards on it, and it caught me by surprise. We didn't pay attention to it back then.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? What's interesting to me listening to it again after all these years is you can hear kind of in that album, the very first Judas Priest album, Rock-a-Rolla, the potential of what was in Judas Priest at the time. In terms of what the band would become, and it's kind of interesting. A lot of those songs don't sound like your typical Priest, and part of the reason I was reading for that is because a lot of those songs are written by the original singer, Al Atkins. So Rob Halford comes into the band, and he's singing songs that some other guy wrote, and he did a great job, but that's part of the reason that album sounds so drastically different from what Priest would become.
Yep. Very similar to like early Scorpions. They kind of... same route and went in a similar direction, except Scorpions became much more pop. Definitely.
And I was reading when that first album, Rock-a-Rolla, came out. The band, it didn't sell too well at the time, and the band was really literally starving. There were some days they went without food, and so by the next album they had to really start. It was kind of do or die, and luckily things went on upward swing for them, but those were like really hungry days, and you can listen to any of the songs on that first album, you can hear how hungry that band was.
Oh, definitely.
As far as just wanting to make it, and and it's interesting what Priest would become, but so by the time you get to 1980 with British Steel, that lineup of a band had really kind of they'd been together for a number of years at that point. They're solid with playing together. They finally kind of identified that classic Priest sound that we all know and love, and they really became the defenders of the faith. I mean, you talk about Judas Priest now, and really
That's
since
default.
yeah, go ahead.
Default Judas Priest right there, man. And Living After Midnight, Breaking Laws, like they're, that's not my favorite Judas Priest song.
Oh yeah, I mean that's. But that's kind of like my song as far as, I mean, it was that song I heard on the radio, very much like when I heard Neon Nights by Black Sabbath. That's the first time I heard Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio on the radio, and that's why these songs have such a special place in our heart, and it's kind of interesting because, again, this is probably one of the more commercial-friendly sounding albums by Priest. But like you said, it's not just this one song. They have this song. Another one I love is, of course, Metal Gods. I mean, Metal God. That's what Rob Halford has referred to these days. And if it was not for that song, we might be calling him something else.
True story.
Yeah. And I come to find out that I've seen like documentaries on just this one album being made. It was recorded in Ringo Starr's home studio, interestingly enough. And if you listen to Metal Gods, there's all these interesting sounds going on. I heard a lot of that was just getting like silverware that was in the house and just banging it against each other. And
clanking that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, who would have ever thought to do something like that? On a rock album.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because talking about Living After Midnight and Metal Gods, the one thing they have in common are they're both great rock anthems, but I think more than that is they've got these are songs that got the power to kind of have you ever seen Priest in concert? They're singing, Rob Halford's singing the lyrics to these songs and bringing, crowd is up on their feet, and we're all with Priest. I mean, they're just great sounding songs and they're timeless.
True story.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's not my favorite on the album. I can't even tell you why we picked it.
Well, I'll tell you why I picked it, because to be honest, it is one of my favorite albums, but also just for the fact that we're talking about the fact that you covered this Living After Midnight song, and I thought, okay, well that's the album it came from, and give us a chance to talk about some of the other albums, because in these interviews, Scott, I don't know if you've listened to other interviews I've done with other people. What I try to do is talk to people about albums that really kind of had an impact on them, and and this is oddly enough what I'm finding is very interesting is like you're the first guy I've had a chance to talk about a Judas Priest album with, and you always hear now Priest is everybody is waving the Priest flag and Priest and metal and everything, and what's surprising me is I've had like one or two people do these interviews, and I'm willing to do them because everybody's got a different story, but I've had 3 guys want to talk to me like you about Rock and Roll Over. So it's kind of interesting that all these people are influenced by Kiss. A lot of these people that were influenced by Kiss are picking the same album. I don't know why that is, but I mean it's a great album. So hey, let's talk about it,
Yeah, it was the first one that I got. Mm-hmm. So, and same with British Steel. It's the first Priest album that I got.
Yeah.
First time I heard that, let me tell you, this is the way everybody should have to listen to these records.
Uh-huh.
And this one, it's not serious, but it's good. Listen, this one, Van Halen, Women in Church, the stuff, 80, 81.
Yeah.
If you get, the first time I heard it was in either a 73 Mustang with some Jensen coaxials and a little Rockford Fosgate Punch 45 amp sitting in the back seat, and you can't. That's what those albums were mixed for. And if you hear it that way, that's the way I remember it. It was weird me trying to mix the tribute and just think of that sound. I just couldn't reach it. I couldn't get what I wanted to get out of that, to tell you the truth. Well, everybody played well, and it's mixed good, but it's just like with modern stuff, just something's missing.
It's very hard to kind of recapture what the original band did, but I got to tell people I've had a chance to hear your tribute to Judas Priest Living After Midnight song, and you guys do an awesome job. I mean, it's a true tribute in the truest form. A lot of times when you do a cover, there's one of two ways you do it. One, you try to kind of like redo the song and just do something totally different with it, and kind of give new life to it and make it all your own. And then there are bands which I kind of agree with, is where you just kind of do a straight cover, which is kind of like what you do, just a straight copy. And why not?
You almost traced it.
Yeah.
I didn't put the real song on and then play over it.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that do that.
Yeah.
They'll just play over the real song, keep that, and that's cool. And then you erase the real song, and there you go. But we like to start from scratch. I mean, it usually starts from a click track.
Yeah.
And I go from there. But that's me. I got to give credit to people because I'm Scott Campbell. I play guitar, bass, lead guitar on that, and everybody. I'm in Florida. The singer is Mark Lanou. He's from a band called Fiction 6. They're a melodic metal band. Wow. Yeah, and he's in Arkansas.
Interesting. That's a modern day. People were doing that. People fail to realize people were doing that before all these COVID lockdowns and everything. But you guys are kind of making it work for you, and why not? Now, you mentioned your bandmates and their other projects. Do you have any other musical projects you're involved with, Scott, currently?
Not right now. I still have a major job. I do work on some other things. I'm mixing album for a newer artist out here, rock. She's kind of pop punk.
Oh wow!
The name is Antalai, Antalai.
Okay.
It's pretty good though. It's pretty good.
Interesting.
Talented,
yeah.
Female artist.
Yeah.
Who can play? Can really play.
Yeah.
And so that's good stuff. Good stuff. It's fun to do. It's fun to do, things that aren't mine.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
interesting.
Sitting here at home, a lot of people, all in 2020, we recorded probably 50, 60 songs.
Oh, wow.
And it was mostly just to get my chops going and just make songs, So, I got a lot of covers, we didn't write about anything. Mark, the singer, Lanou, and then Rory Fashion's the drummer. He's out of Nashville. Mm-hmm. So they have a band, Fiction 6. He's been working on that now, writing songs for it at the same time. So we've kind of taken a break on,
doing this,
putting stuff out. But we have a bunch of stuff just ready to go. It's like got to add a vocal here or a background here.
Oh, wow.
There.
Wow.
And then, I got some Boston. And,
I can't wait to hear that. I love Boston. Yeah, wow. Yeah. And kind of getting back to like breaking down the origin of a song. I'll give you a perfect example. Like talking about covering other people's material. I was chatting with this guy that last night. I interviewed him about Van Halen too, because that's what he wanted to talk about, and he plays in a Van Halen tribute. And we're going to do some more stuff down the line. But he was talking about Van Halen singer David Lee Roth in 1985. He put out this 4-song EP. They were cover songs. And the one we were talking about, which Just a Gigolo, which I had no idea. We were looking online last night, come to find out that song that a lot of people like you and me, probably Scott, heard for the first time when David Lee Roth released that EP in 1985, Just a Gigolo. Come to find out, that song dates all the way back to 1929, was originally a hit in Germany, and they've had other people like Bing Crosby, of all people, the Village People cover it. Just probably the most covered song. It's interesting.
That, what else did they do? He did Big Bad Bill.
Oh, yeah, Van Halen.
That's a Leon, what's his name? Leon Redbone, right?
Yeah, I think so. And you can find that on the Van Halen album, Diver Down, along with Oh Pretty Woman. They just, it didn't, now that's an example where Van Halen kind of made that their own. It doesn't exactly sound like Roy Orbison's version, but you know what song it is, Yeah,
they got the best version of Dancing in the Street ever made, admit it.
Oh, yeah.
Come on. It's got to be better than the Mick Jagger, David Bowie one, correct?
Yeah. But I will tell you, Scott, I just bring this up because just for kicks, I dare you later go on YouTube and just type in Just a Gigolo, and you'll be amazed not only how many people have covered that song, but just to see what it started. I mean, David Lee Roth, let's just say, he really rocked it up. I mean, it started out originally, like I said, as a song made famous in 1929, if you can believe that, in Germany. And it was like kind of a swing type of orchestra type song. And And what Dave did it with it, and a few people before he did it, just really rocked it up, and it's just amazing to see the transformation of all these different people covering it.
Yeah, Dave's amazing, because it's sad, that in this day and age we still have a lot of rockers with us.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're old, they're aging. That's we all are.
Yeah.
And people rag them like, oh, they saw Kiss and Paul sounds like crap, or whoever. It's like, what do you expect? I mean, I can't believe he's up there doing what he did at 68, and Gene's up there at 71.
Oh yeah.
And David Lee Roth losing his voice, and Geddy Lee's losing his voice. Yeah. That's what happens. But you know that.
Yeah.
And maybe they should quit. As long as their fans are still going, and usually when you're in the room and it's loud, you're not hearing all that. It's just,
well, I tell you though, David Lee Roth, from what I understand, I hope he releases. He's got this unreleased album of stuff that he's starting to kind of leak out with John 5 that they did, I think, over 5 years ago. Now that Van Halen's no more, there's talk that he's going to release it, and it's kind of I think he can record stuff in the studio, and they can kind of fix it up. But see, David Lee Roth, what a lot of people fail to realize, I mean, I've always dug him because I'm a longtime Van Halen fan, but I think I consider Dave much more of a entertainer. I'll admit that Sammy Hagar's a much better singer and songwriter, but Dave really, the chemistry him and Eddie had, especially, I mean, that's kind of what he brought to the band, and from what I understand, that's kind of a reason he had friction between him and Eddie, because Eddie's like, oh, Dave's all into all this crazy dance music, but it seemed to work,
Yeah, I mean, but that was a gimmick. It was heavy rock and roll that you danced to.
Yeah. I mean, even the song on the last album, Tattoo, such a David Lee Roth song, but it fit what Van Halen was doing at the time,
Correct.
Yeah. And
people are too mean to old artists. They get old, you lose it.
Yeah.
They still have to work.
Yeah, and getting back to Judas Priest, I'll tell you, I recently got Rob Halford's book. Hadn't had a chance to get it when it first came out, but in any event, I was kind of amazed to read that, like you said, these guys are getting a little older, and he had to he was getting to the point where he admits in the book that, hey, I was getting to the point where it's starting to forget some of my own lyrics, so to kind of help me out, I decided, somebody suggested it, hey Rob, why don't you type out your lyrics and use a teleprompter? And he says, since then, I don't seem to be having that issue anymore, And if I do, I can kind of...
That's good. Axl Rose was using one on, fresh stuff in the 80s.
Yeah.
Remember, he had the teleprompters all down there.
Yeah. It's kind of... But, and what's getting interesting about Judas Priest, when you talk about the British Steel album, I mean, that was partly the reason they named it British Steel, because Judas Priest is a British band. That's kind of being a pride of their home country and where they're from, and the fact that it was made, like I said, in Ringo Starr's home studio in England. But up until recently, like when Scott Travis joined, Judas Priest was a band you never would think about having an American guy playing in the band. But they've had two of them now. They've had Tim Owens and Scott Travis, and it seems to have worked for them,
Probably because, they moved here.
Yeah.
That happens.
I mean, even Rob Halford...
Rob probably still lives in Arizona, correct?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of been Americanized, but one thing that Priest is one of those bands, I think, I dare say even more than Black Sabbath, that people kind of point to as, the so-called defenders of the faith, because that's one thing Priest has always been great at, waving the metal flag and kind of, we're metal and we're proud of it,
Oh, I mean, it's the first thing that comes to my mind if you say heavy metal.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I was reading this book that Rob Halford recently put out, and I've heard interviews of him over the years, especially since he's come out about being the fact that he's gay. And what's interesting is he's, I'm guilty of this myself, but when I first became a Priest fan, I see all these leather and studs. It's like, oh yeah, they're totally metal. And he's like, fans had no idea that I was getting that stuff in the leather sex shops in London, and it was kind of like that was my thought process. It had nothing to do with being metal, but I kind of went with it. It worked for us.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it was like bikers.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I was reading and doing research for this today, Scott, and Rob Halford has said over the years, part of the reason Judas Priest decided to make a much more commercial album with British Steel was they had just done a tour opening up for AC/DC, I think, in the year before, in 1979, and they were up close and hearing all that great AC/DC music every night, and he's like, we'd like to have some of our stuff that maybe sound a little more commercial, get on the radio, and that was kind of what influenced them to do it.
Yeah, what's cool is that, they did it, and they did it well, and then they still did heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And then they got heavier at one point.
Oh yeah.
Look at Painkiller. It's heavy as it gets for them.
Yeah, and by the time Painkiller came out, that's like 11 years later, 1991. What's interesting is that was a real return to the heavy, aggressive Priest sound that we all know and love. And ever since then, people they continue to put out great albums, but people kind of saying, when are you guys gonna put out another Painkiller? That's kind of a new reference point. And I heard even Rob talking about it in the book, and even recently saying, no, we're not going to put out another Painkiller because that was a great album for its time, but we're not about repeating ourselves. We're about kind of moving forward, which I kind of did because at this point, Judas Priest is one of those bands that could be a nostalgia band and just kind of go out and live off the legacy of their catalog of music. But I dig the fact that they continue to put out new music, and from what I understand, the next one is almost done. So
that's good. Yeah, so that's just like if you're a Rush band, their last album was the best one they put out since Moving Pictures.
Yeah.
Because I really don't care for the 80s, 90s Rush,
Yeah.
They went out in the blaze.
Oh yeah, and it's just amazing. And you would think that Geddy Lee and Alex would want to carry on, but I think, like you're saying, they're both getting up there, and maybe Geddy's voice is not what it used to be. Perfect time to kind of retire and just live off your laurels. And I maybe every now and then they could do something together. They Geddy could put out a solo album. They could go out and make guest appearances. And it's kind of interesting because Neil Peart, after all these years, he's still kind of the new guy because he's not the original drummer. But what's interesting about that is he kind of changed the Rush sound anyways, because when he joined the band, you would think Geddy Lee wrote all those great Rush songs. No, it was Neil Peart.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Neil Peart was the guy who wrote all those great lyrics, Yeah. So that's just kind of interesting, and wanted to kind of tip our hat to Judas Priest today. Now, do you want to tell us about any of these other covers you guys have in the can, or would you rather?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
We got Europe coming.
Oh, great.
So not Final Countdown.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we did Superstitious for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Okay.
Wow,
I love that. Europe, because again, like you just pointed out, when everybody hears the name Europe, we automatically go to that song, The Final Countdown. And it's kind of interesting because Europe is often thought about as like a one-hit wonder, but if you dig into the catalog, they got a lot of great tunes that you probably have heard on the radio but just aren't aware of. And again, they continue to put out new music. And I've heard Joey Tempest, the singer over the years, talk about the fact that, and even in this day and age, it's got to be a great thing, because while they're known for that kind of being a one-hit wonder for that one song, The Final Countdown, he says, we're never short of, except for maybe this year, but usually he's like, we're never short of getting offers for a gig on New Year's Eve. And then, of course, when they're playing New Year's Eve every year, they got to, not only do you have to play that song, but that's like, that's going to be the encore.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk about that. And I think next time, Scott, we talk, and I'll be shooting you an email later, and we can schedule the next one of these. But next time we do it, I seen your video you guys did of kind of your tribute to the Bee Gees, and I was digging that, especially after just seeing the Bee Gees documentary on HBO. Did you get a chance to see that?
Yeah, no, I haven't yet.
Oh, I strongly urge, if you get the chance, to see it, because it's kind of they do just a great job of telling those guys a story. Kind of, it's just clips of them telling their story with their own mouths. And Barry, obviously the other two brothers are dead, but Barry Gibbs, his interviews are like a little more recent, and so and that's what kind of makes this interesting. I mean, it kind of ends with him talking about, he had a little friction with the one brother, Robin, but he's like, to do these songs, and he goes, I can't even imagine to get up there on stage without my brothers, which is kind of like, you can imagine how Alex Van Halen is feeling these days,
Yeah. I mean, there's no point.
Yeah.
I mean, not to not get out on stage, to go be whatever. And I think that was what Barry's problem with Robin was he said, yeah, go do whatever, but don't go be the Bee Gees.
Yeah,
and I think he used the Bee Gees name in Europe, and
And in fact, we can talk about it later day, but I do think Barry Gibbs just put out a new solo album. I haven't had a chance to hear that, but it's good that he's, in some way carrying on. But I do think there'd be more of a backlash if he was trying to even, carry on as the Bee Gees without the, two brothers. So I think he's doing the right thing,
Right. Yeah, but his tours that he was doing, they're good. I mean, he goes out as Barry Gibb. He does Bee Gees songs because that's who he is.
Yeah, I mean,
his son is in the band playing guitar. Stephen Gibbs, amazing guitar player, bass player. He played for Black Label. I think he plays for Saigon Kick now.
Oh wow!
Or did. Stephen Gibb. Look him up.
Interesting, and
I have to drop his name. He's a good guy.
Oh, great, and people forget. One thing you see in the documentary on HBO when you get a chance to watch it, Scott, is that you forget what a great songwriter Barry Gibbs. I mean, and his late brothers. But I mean, he wrote the song for Grease. He wrote all those great songs from Saturday Night Fever. And in fact, when the Bee Gees kind of had a downturn in their career, they stopped recording their own, for themselves for a while, and they wrote all these great tunes for other people, and they kind of that's kind of what brought them back, is writing these songs for other people. So it's really true what they say that and that, again, talking about Judas Priest like we were today, that's part of what made that such a great album. It had a great sound. It had a great I mean, they really had the songs. They really, I think, at that point were starting to develop as songwriters, and from that point on, they just they only progressed.
Yeah.
And that's not true with any band. I mean, you could have a band where you got 5 great-looking guys, but if they don't have the tunes, if they don't, just got a band of great-looking guys, you're not going to go too far. I mean, another band people are always criticizing is Kiss, but I think why Kiss has staying power, Gene and Paul are such great songwriters, and I can say that because the band is still going 50 years after the fact. We're still hearing these songs being played on the radio that that came out in 1973, and later, and just to wrap up on Judas Priest, British Steel, we're talking about an album that is 40 years old now, going on 41, and we're still talking about it. That's the influence that album has had.
Well, the thing is, it's a big generational, demographic of people grew up listening to that, and you can't deny it anymore. I mean, the radio didn't give these guys, a fair shake, but now they have to, or everything does. They're everywhere because a huge demographic with a lot of money listens to that music, regardless of whether they like Kiss or Judas Priest or not. But if you don't like British Steel, you just the terrorists win. Come on, it's like
and then even
metal album, isn't it? I mean, we could argue about it for hours, don't you think?
Oh yeah,
put an epicenter of metal.
Oh yeah,
that might be it.
I mean, I would say like the top 3, the top 3 metal bands, or at least the top 3 like British metal bands. You got, I would say, go between Sabbath, Priest, and Maiden, and they're different types of bands.
Exactly.
But people all say, oh, metal, Sabbath, all the way, Maiden and Priest. In fact, Priest and especially Priest and Maiden have always kind of had this competition as far as like who, among the fans, anyways, about. Oh, Priest is a better band than Iron Maiden, but in a way they're metal, but they're different types of metal music in a way. But they got that great classic British metal sound that we love, and so that's what. And I'll just wrap up with this to further prove the influence of Judas Priest. I've seen all kinds of Judas Priest tribute bands pop up all over the place. So, when you see that happening, I mean, that just speaks volumes.
Yeah, we're gonna do another one.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah, because you know what song I really like on British Steel though? I don't know if I want to say it's my favorite, but I go to it is "You Don't Have to Be Old to Be Wise."
Oh, that's a good one. And then another one, oddly enough, that I'm going to point out, "United." I mean, it's not quite.
Oh, yeah.
It's not quite a ballad. I dare say it goes between being a ballad and a rock anthem because
It's an anthem.
have you ever seen Priest live? I mean, when they play that in concert, again, people are kind of up on their people, and it's all about, if you listen to the lyrics of the song, it's all about bringing people together, which if a metal band can do that, they're doing something right,
Yep.
Well, Scott Campbell, I'd like to thank you once again and for doing this. And like I said, these interviews are going to start rolling out probably in the next week or two. But I'll be sending you an email later, Scott, and we can set up the next one maybe for next week. Thanks for doing this. I had a lot of fun today. Take care, my friend.
All right, appreciate it.
Bye-bye.